Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm not white, I'm Tomek in St. Petersburg.
All right, our topic today is the story of OJ by request. Thanks to Brian for suggesting this, and thanks to John for seconding that motion and making some recommendations regarding source material.
Thank
So,
you,
of course,
gentlemen.
by OJ, yes, thanks to all who voted. And those of you that voted for the Gaddafi speech, that's coming soon. So, you have not been forgotten. Of course, by OJ, we mean Orenthal James Simpson, who was born in 1947 and recently passed in this year of our Lord 2024.
Rest in peace.
So, yeah, let's get into it. The documentary OJ Made in America was recommended by John, so thanks for that. This was an ESPN sports documentary made in 2016. There are 5 episodes. I think it's about 8 hours total, something like that. You watched all 8 hours, didn't you? You binge watched.
I did. In a somber day of the soul yesterday with a throbbing headache.
Well, you're a better man than I am. I only watched episode 3 and not all of that, but anyway, that's okay. I can go back and watch more later or not. We'll see how this conversation goes. Maybe it won't be necessary. What do you want to say about the documentary since you watched more of it than I did?
Well, I guess I'll just speak to OJ very briefly as a cultural moment or personage.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, while I was hesitant about this choice of topic just because it seemed so macabre and I didn't really want to delve so deep into the psyche of Orenthal, but ultimately I feel
But you did. You
I
got
did,
into it.
and I feel that I benefited overall because in a sense it was a history lesson. I was reminded of the racial tensions that existed particularly in LA from the 70s onwards. Something that I was aware of and tangentially experienced growing up in Phoenix. But just to kind of get close to those moments again of the Rodney King riots and the way that America was transfixed by this particular trial, and just thinking about race, it was a worthwhile endeavor. And I think it is such a massive story that I'm glad we decided to devote an episode to it. That's all I want to say about that.
Okay.
So we've covered
You
Michael
came
Jackson.
around.
Yeah, we've covered Michael Jackson. And I kind of feel like here's another huge Black American icon, who's critical to understanding America in the latter part of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st.
Right on. Okay, well, this is a random discovery I made. I've not
Mark, can we
seen
go
this
back one
myself.
slide really quick?
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just really quickly. So I spoke more to OJ's place like in the cultural pantheon, but very quickly, let's talk about this program via this review from Michelle Dean in The Guardian, just to help the viewers. So the reason that it's called OJ Made in America is because it really speaks to several touching points related to the US. So she's nicely distilled it into talking about the obsession with celebrity, the way a fair defense depends on a defendant's riches, the public's endless appetite for coverage of a tragedy, the incompetence of the prosecutors, and the inability to transcend race. So, just that probably we're going to speak to all those issues, but just kind of quickly mention that those may be some places that we go in this program.
Okay. All right, moving on. I didn't watch this, but here's another sports documentary for Textual Deviants. It's called O.J. Simpson, Juice on the Loose. And that phrase became, um, something of a
Ubiquitous.
meme. Yeah, back when he was on the run. The juice is on the loose. But interestingly, this is from 1974, and it was directed by George Romero of Night of the Living Dead fame. So, for what it's worth. Now, I recently watched Thaddeus Russell's Unreported podcast, or listened to and watched. He and Michael Weimer were talking about OJ soon after his death a week or two ago. And the title of the episode is American Folk Legend. So they consider him a kind of Stagger Lee character who is memorialized in the murder ballad from, I don't know, the 1920s maybe. But this song was covered by Nick Cave. There's a very interesting version of this song, and so that too is part of American tradition, right? You've got like John Dillinger and these Bonnie and Clyde, these criminals that capture the public's imagination, and they become famous and infamous. Of course, OJ was famous before, but apart from his activities on the gridiron, he, I guess you could say, he experienced another type of fame or infamy later. And you sent me this discussion from the Piers Morgan show. Of course, Piers Morgan is the tool that we love to hate, but there were some interesting guests on here. We had Mark Lamont Hill, who I found myself agreeing with the most. And, he was the first to point out that it's probably the only time he'll ever be on the same side, as it were, as Alan Dershowitz, the fanatic Zionist. And don't forget, he's also the the former lawyer of Jeffrey Epstein. So funny how this guy always turns up defending these unsavory characters, let's say. But then on the other side, you had Jeffrey Toobin, who said he should have died in prison. Jeffrey Toobin, you'll recall, is the guy who was either suspended or fired by CNN because he was jerking off on a Skype call. You know about this? Are you there?
Now I am, yeah.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, temporarily. But hopefully
Okay.
the audience didn't.
Did you hear what I said about Jeffrey Toobin?
The last thing I heard was you saying that he was dismissed from something.
Yeah, he was either fired or suspended by CNN for jerking off during a Skype call.
Ah, okay.
You don't know
Nice.
about that? That's why I've referred to him as the public masturbator. And
Okay, nice.
but look, he suffers no consequences for that, right? Like, he wrote a book about OJ. He said he should have died in prison, so he's condemning him publicly, but it's like down the memory hole. What happened just a few months ago, you know? Like, he was on a Skype call with his colleagues, and they took a break, and they came back, and he forgot to turn off his cam, and he's jerking off, So
It
yeah,
happens.
look it up. Yeah, it happens. Anyway, you heard what I said about Dershowitz, right?
Yeah.
defending Epstein and part of the OJ Dream Team. So anyway, I thought the conversation was interesting. And as I say, I agreed mostly with Mark Lamont Hill. So,
Who's now on Al Jazeera,
so,
you know? Did you know that?
yeah, he got fired for his allegedly anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic comments, and then he ended up on Al Jazeera.
He's pretty good on there.
Yeah, he's good on the Gaza situation for sure.
Did you recently see
Um,
Dershowitz? I guess Dershowitz has gone up against Norman Finkelstein a few times, right?
oh yeah, well, and this is not the first time they've clashed. Like, there's
Right.
an old video of Finkelstein on Democracy Now
Yeah, I
tearing
saw that.
Dershowitz a new asshole and accusing him of plagiarism, and yeah, and Dershowitz has no defense other than to say no fair anti-Semitism. You're a self-hating Jew. Anyway, so let's start the story of OJ at the beginning. I've got a picture of him here with his father, who I didn't realize this. Okay, he's born in. Is he raised also in San Francisco? I mean,
Yeah.
he's born in San Francisco, grows up there. Um, and his father, I didn't know this. His father was openly gay and was a drag queen and died of AIDS in the 80s. And there was, I don't know. I think OJ was closer to his mother, and had a rather strange relationship with Daddy Dearest, but that was something I learned. I didn't know about that.
I mean, and that for sure may have contributed to some of OJ's demons. So it's an important part of his story.
Well, um, yeah, like
I'm not saying
what?
justifiably, but like there's a scene in one of the earlier episodes of Made in America where I think his childhood friend says how they went over to OJ's dad's house, and OJ's dad opens the door semi naked, and behind him is another dude, and then like
Right?
in the car ride home, not a word was said. So like OJ was clearly fuming. And
Okay.
later in a little note from Nicole that I've put into the slideshow, there's some reference to a gay kiss and OJ just going nuts. Like a gay kiss in the vicinity. So yeah,
Oh, I see. I see.
there may be some like issues with his
Some
masculinity and
issues. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Daddy issues. Your head's a bit out of frame, by the way, but
Okay, I'll do that. Is that better?
mm, yeah.
That
Yeah,
better?
somewhat. All right, let's move on. So
Okay.
he he comes to national attention, I guess, in the late '60s as the Heisman Trophy winner at USC. He played for the Trojans. I mean, he is famous for a 64-yard run against USC's rival UCLA. They did win a national championship too. So he was already a star in college. And this is your slide. Here he is pictured with Bob Hope. Tell us about this.
But just from very early on, the documentary emphasized how OJ was like the counter-revolutionary black athlete, and while he's coming up alongside icons like Muhammad Ali and the Black Panther movement that influenced the Olympics, he his he never really spoke to race issues, and you could see that his goal was to be accepted by white people, and his
Mm-hmm.
experience at USC very much reflected that. It's a very prosperous, affluent school, and he was embraced, and he was doubly embraced because it was clear that he wasn't like a rabble rouser. So he was like given a pedestal because he was seen as like the good Negro. And Bob Hope was speaking at a huge, I guess maybe it was like a pregame or a halftime show, and there were huge crowds. It's not pictured here, but he just says, "It's a pleasure to be here at OJU," because OJ was so huge at the time. So he's referring to USC. "You haven't had a riot, a demonstration, or even a sit-in. Are you sure this is even a college?" So yeah, a more conservative student body, and I thought it's worthy of inclusion, just considering what's going on right now with student demonstrations around America.
America, the bastion of free speech.
Yes.
Unless you say shit we don't like, then we're gonna shut you down.
And send in the riot squads.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, so he's the Wayne Brady of college athletics, right?
I guess so. I don't really know. I forgot who Wayne Brady is.
Remember,
I know the name.
well,
but...
remember the Chappelle show joke? Wayne Brady makes Bryant Gumbel look like Malcolm X. And then there's like a Wayne Brady episode where Wayne Brady
Wayne
actually
Brady?
appears. Oh, he was like on this show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? Okay. He's a comedian, and I don't know.
Yeah, or Bill Cosby.
TV host.
They reference him a bit too. Like he's kind of in that.
Yeah, maybe like that. All right. Anyway, let's move on. So this is your slide too.
But it is pretty interesting, right? It is pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, this will speak to that too. So Robert Lipsyte is a journalist who was featured quite prominently on the show, especially in the first few episodes. And Robert Lipsyte just has a little anecdote, which I thought we could mention. He says he, meaning OJ, was telling me a story about being at a teammate's wedding with his wife, sitting at a table with mostly, as he said, Negroes. And he overheard a white woman at the next table saying, "Look, there's OJ sitting with all those niggers." And I remember in my naivete saying to OJ, "Gee, wow, that must be terrible for you." He said, "No, it was great. Don't you understand? She knew that I wasn't black. She saw me as OJ." And really, at that moment, I thought he was fucked. Any reaction to that?
Well, what's the chronology here? This is during his USC days?
It's definitely very early on.
Okay.
Do you have any...
Well, it's just like his goal was to transcend race in America. All right, so after USC, and this is what
I guess I would just ask: was his goal to transcend race, or was his goal to like be loved by white people? You could say it's the same thing, but I'd say that maybe there's a slight distinction there.
Or just to be loved for who he was, or just to take race out of the equation.
Yeah, I'd say that's like the more generous interpretation, but one might also suspect that there could be some like,
self-hating or something.
Exactly. And again, some like romanticizing of white and seeing like white is right. I mean, especially considering where he ends up living, who he ends up spending most of his time with. Again, I'm not saying
some of his own comments that we'll look at later.
His preference for white women, I mean, I think there's reason to believe that this is more than just someone trying to break out of the box that you're in as like if you classify yourself primarily by your race. I mean, I think we'd be naive to just say that he was trying to become a fully realized human being.
Fair enough. Well, this was a bit before your time, but I knew him mostly as a Buffalo Bill, number 32. He was 32 in college too. So my guy was a little bit later. There was some overlap in their careers, but my guy was number 34, Earl Campbell, Houston Oilers.
Okay.
Another
I thought you were
great
going to say Marcus
running
Allen.
back. No. Earl Campbell, Houston Oilers, number 34. Who, I mean, I don't know. Was he better than OJ? They were both great on the football field, no question about that. But he was, even though I would have been young at that time, I heard his name. I knew very well who he was. Football games were on the TV in my household, so he was a household name for sure. And yeah, it's sometimes forgotten. He's known most as a Buffalo Bill, but he did finish his career with the hometown team. He was a 49er for a year or two there. Interestingly, I mean that he's not well known for his achievements with the 49ers, but he never won a championship or anything as a Buffalo Bill because they sucked. They were basically a team of scrubs plus a superstar. So
I didn't know that, but I guess
they didn't
just
do too well.
Something I'll add is just that this is first he came from San Fran, so he came from more like sunny climate, and he didn't particularly have much of an affinity for this cold upstate New York industrial city, and I think that was hard on him. So he was always drawn to more of like the LA celebrity life, and was very eager to return to it when his time at the Bills was over.
Yeah. Well, let's there's an interesting video I found presented by Chuck Klosterman, who I know him more for his music writing, which is very entertaining, but he's a sports fan as well. And let me just play his presentation of OJ as one of the top 100 NFL players of all time. OJ is ranked number 40. So let's check out the first few seconds of this.
If you start a conversation about O.J. Simpson and you begin by talking about what a great tailback he was, initially people are confused and then they get mad. I mean, it's just so weird now because even talking about him as a football player, it seems like you're missing, like we're overlooking the obvious. O.J.'s football legacy is destroyed. People will never remember or think about what a great running back he was because of the last half of his life, and there's no way around it. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. In his obituary, football player now is mentioned in the first paragraph, but they don't talk about USC or the Bills until paragraph 5. I think people have completely overlooked the fact now that he was clearly the best running back of the 70s. So if you sort of realize that he's the best running back at a time when the most important part of the offensive game is running the football, I think you could easily argue that O.J. Simpson is the most valuable player of the 70s for the entire league. Every time he ran the ball, it was almost like the Bills' equivalent of throwing the ball deep. It might not work, but if you made a mistake, they would score.
You know, when you're fresh in the game, early in the game, you got a lot on your mind. You're thinking of the game plans. You're thinking of things that you saw. You've been watching it on film all week. As the game goes on, you get tired and you stop thinking so much and you start reacting.
All right, enough of that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. There's no doubt about his skill, right? I just lost.
Well, yeah, I mean,
my.
just watching that, I thought about my boy Michael Jackson, you know. But I would say like
Mm-hmm.
Michael's managed to still have his musical legacy be the number one thing. You know, it's like, yeah, he has a lot of shit, a lot of baggage, but I don't think anyone's gonna put that above the music. Whereas here, like, the guy makes a good point that you won't get there till the fifth paragraph. But like, Michael's got a biopic coming out in a year, and it's supposed to be like mostly favorable, and you know, so I just think, not to always bring it back to MJ, but I feel like you do the same kind of shit with like the Rolling Stones or something. That's your reference point. So,
And
yeah, I would just
Neruda,
say,
Pablo
yeah,
Neruda.
exactly. So my comfort zone is MJ, and yeah, I just say,
Well, fair enough. I mean, this is like the issue that Philip Roth called the moral beauty pageant, right? Like, why are authors judged by their personal lives? Like, the only thing that's important is what they wrote. You know, like even if they were murderers or rapists or criminals of some sort, you have to put that aside when you read what they've written, or maybe you don't. I mean, that there's an argument to be had on both sides, but he said literature is not a moral beauty pageant. And if we're talking about like other fields, sports, for example, I've always thought it's absurd that Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame because he fucking gambled, you know? I mean, he's clearly one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And I mean, he has all kinds of records, right? He's the all-time hit leader. And he's not in the Hall of Fame because one commissioner, namely Paul Giamatti's father, did you know that? The actor Paul Giamatti. His father was commissioner at one time. I think he was an interim commissioner. And then he had like a personal beef with Rose, and he's the one who gave him the lifetime ban, I think. Um, that's ridiculous. Look at Ty Cobb. He was not a good guy, you know, but he's in the Hall of Fame. Babe Ruth,
yeah, I mean, I
had
think we're in
his
agreement on this.
scandals. Well, I mean, this is different. This is different, obviously, in that Pete Rose didn't murder two people allegedly, right? There've been no allegations of that, but still, like,
Same with Michael.
you
Yeah,
can't. Yeah, you can't take away. You can't take away. I don't think you can take away their achievements. Like, you definitely can't.
of
But
course.
okay,
I completely agree.
if people say, well, I don't want to listen to his music or I don't want to watch his highlights or whatever, okay, that's your choice too. But the individuals in question did achieve those things. They did do those things. And so maybe you should just say, well, human beings are complex, and we're not all good or evil, you know?
And we're not even the
But
same
that's just what
person
I
10 years
think.
ago
What do
as we
you
are
think?
now. You know, that's,
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I like to always go to that kind of metaphysical
Absolutely.
shit where it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're always new, and
No,
we don't even
absolutely.
exist. Yeah, we don't even exist as individuals. So
Right.
like, individuality itself is an illusion.
Yeah.
And yeah, we
Well,
can get really spacey later.
I think you sent me a text earlier this week saying something like, you know, there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, any of us could be OJ. Although
Exactly. And
I
we
doubt
create OJ,
I
and that's the
doubt
whole
any of
point.
us, well, but I doubt any of us could do what he did on the football field. But your point is that any of us could find ourselves, I don't know, in the midst of a scandal. Maybe we all have the potential to become
The
murders
point is
or
that we're
like
all. This is what a
victims of
human.
uncontrollable
We've been
rage.
over this before, but this is a human being. This is what a human being does with this set of conditions, and I'm what a human being does with my set of conditions. So all we're doing is looking at another face of ourselves. I'm sorry, that's like pretty controversial and like unsympathetic, but it's true to me, in my humble opinion. I could be wrong.
Well, I think it's very. What do you mean? It's very sympathetic. I think the current attitude
No, I mean it's
these
like
days is to
unsympathetic.
condemn.
I mean it's unsympathetic to people, like to the victims.
The
Like
victims.
it might
Right.
seem callous to them.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think the attitude today is to condemn and to point fingers and to virtue signal. I'm a good person. I'm not one of the bad people. But obviously that's just a kind of projection. Certain people want scapegoats,
Yeah,
so
but
that they feel
we
better
also
about
have to.
themselves.
Yeah, but if your children were murdered, I wouldn't
Well,
want to like.
I'm not an apologist. I'm not an apologist for him, or I'm not saying that he shouldn't have paid for his crimes or any of that. But there is something to he who cast the first stone. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that's one.
You willing to do it?
I think that's 100% true. And then I think like another strain, which is incontrovertible. Is that a word?
Mm-hmm.
That should be a section
Nicely
where, like,
done.
because I get to like voice the listeners' insecurities, because they're probably like, I think I know that word when they listen to our show, and they're like, but I'm glad they're breaking it down so I can like be more confident using it myself. Anyways, I think it's also incontrovertible that I still feel insecure using it. That greatness, the level of ambition it requires to achieve like incredible highs in different fields comes with ugly sides. And it's not a coincidence that so many giants of the arts, of sports, of other spheres end up having incredibly dark sides. And so this will continue to happen. And it just goes with the territory, like the beauty comes with the shit, and it's naive to think otherwise. I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just thinking of other sports heroes like, Rod Carew, who, to my knowledge, no one ever said a bad word about. Like he was just a great man. I think he's still alive, but
I don't know who that is. I just
player.
heard Adam Sandler reference him once. He was Jewish, right?
No, I don't think so. Rod Carew? No.
Really?
Think
he
so.
was in the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song. But maybe he is black and he converted. How do you spell Rod Carew?
Carew. No, I think he's a born again Christian, actually. I mean, maybe converted multiple times, but
he was in the Hanukkah song. And the first thing I read is there's no evidence that Carew ever formally converted to Judaism, although he wore a chai necklace during his playing days. His first wife, Marilyn Levy, is Jewish, and he was a member of Temple Beth Shalom in Santa Ana, California. I'm just saying it was funny because in the Hanukkah song, like, Adam Sandler's trying to shout out like the whole Jewish community and how diverse it is.
Right, I know. And and Carew rhymes with Jew, so that was a good name to include. He also includes Goldie Hawn and I don't know who else. But anyway, my point is everyone pretty much thought of him as a good guy, but who knows? Maybe he has an ex-girlfriend that's eager to tell her story.
Well, I'm just thinking of like Jordan, and I think we both watched
some disgruntled fan, But
we both watched the Jordan special on Netflix, right? Did you watch the Last Dance?
I don't Jordan. I don't think I did.
Oh, you have to watch The Last Dance. It's incredible.
No,
Did you like Jordan? Did you like Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, He's fine.
Okay, well, I
He's
mean, he was
fine.
like totally iconic for me. But anyway, I mean, he doesn't have anything like OJ
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but he was fiercely competitive, and he would be like really ruthless with his teammates when they fucked up in practice or whatever. So there were aspects of him
Yeah.
that were
Well,
unsavory, as you say.
Larry Bird too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have I lost you? Can
No,
you
I'm
hear
here.
me?
Yeah,
Larry
yeah.
Bird as well.
I heard you.
Larry
Yeah,
Bird as well. He was a
I heard you.
notorious shit talker, and I don't know. He had. I heard a story that he had several illegitimate kids, which I mean, I don't care. That's not my business, but that upset some people. Tiger Woods, that became an issue for some people. But yeah, none of this detracts from their achievements. But as you say, like the beauty, um, with the beauty, you have to accept a certain amount of shit as well. And just about Jordan, don't forget his gambling, which some
Yeah.
people say that's why his father got whacked, but I don't know if that's been proven. All right, so after his football career, he started doing commercials, and this is your quote up at the top. For us, OJ was colorless, said Frank Olson, the Hertz rent-a-car chairman. So I've got this funny video, which I'm going to share because I remember this commercial very well, and maybe I'll even sing along with it.
Winning throughout the nation as Hertz the superstar. You got the winning combination. Super people, super cars. Making that extra effort to meet your special needs. Getting you in, getting you out with super speed.
Hertz, the superstar in rent-a-car. Hertz, the superstar in rent-a-car. You know it, he says.
Nice.
So after football, he why do I keep losing my screen there? After football, he embarked on this endorsement career. Most famously, he was a spokesperson for Hertz Rent-A-Car. He was the superstar in Rent-A-Car. And I remember that jingle well. I had to do some digging, but I found it. It was
Nice.
in my head. I don't know. That was 1977, so I was really young, but it was blaring in my parents' living room from the TV apparently. So yeah, he did endorsements for Hertz Rent-A-Car, and OJ pimped OJ. Literally, he was the Tree Sweet orange juice spokesperson. So good for
That OJ
him.
looks pretty good.
And then, yeah, delicious vitamin C. And then he started doing acting too. This is just one of his projects. He was in a made for TV movie. He starred in that with Bewitched, the star from Bewitched, Elizabeth Montgomery, a very lovely, attractive white lady. And so, in this made for TV movie called You Can't Make This Up, A Killing Affair from 1977, he's married to a black woman and he has a kid, but then he embarks on this affair with, I think they're both detectives. Um, this surfaced like right after he died, so I watched a clip from it, and so he has an affair with this white lady
What do
that
you mean it
he's
surfaced right
that's
after
a
he died?
well, I saw like an article about it. It said
What do you
OJ
mean?
starred in this
Right,
this
but it
made for
it came
TV
out
movie
though,
was
right?
referenced. No. It's from 1977. It was just
Yeah,
referenced
yeah.
in one of the obits.
Okay. I see.
Mm-hmm. So what's wrong?
Nothing.
You okay there?
Hello?
We've got some audio problems here. All right. So anyway, as I said, you can't make it up. A
I seem to
killing
have lost you.
affair. How appropriate. So then he's probably most famous for his movie roles in the Naked Gun franchise, 1988, 1991, and then early 1994, which that was the third installment. And I mention that because just a few months later, I find myself watching the 1994 NBA Finals, which were ultimately won by my team, the Houston Rockets, their first of two back-to-back championships. But the one of the games is interrupted by footage of a white Bronco being chased by LAPD, or as some have said, it was a motorcade more than a chase. But I'll let you take over.
Well, let's go to the next slide then.
Okay. Carry on.
Sure. So, again, I feel like you will remember that moment more intimately than I will, because I do remember watching that chase, but it was like one of my first times ever making contact with the event that was OJ, or the phenomenon that was OJ. Like I never watched him play football, so I just remember being interested in what the outcome of this motorcade would be. But the documentary goes into detail about the chase. It's obviously, if we were making like a top 10 moments of OJ's life in terms of what made him infamous, this is probably top 5. In terms of entertainment value, anyway. And it's just so interesting how an event like this can happen, where people got wind of this and, were running to the scene to be part of this essentially street party. You can see in the image that I've posted people lining the highway bridge, the sides of the highway. They were all around his house, and the vast majority were fans and were on his side, and people chanting OJ.
And free OJ, free OJ, free
Yeah.
OJ.
The police commissioner that was interviewed during this part of the episode, seemed to be pretty kind of appalled that this was allowed to take place, that he was kind of given this preferential treatment rather than the Bronco being pulled over and, whatever had to be done to apprehend him. But,
which is what LAPD would usually do, especially if it was a black suspect.
Exactly.
I mean, this is just a few years after Rodney King, of course.
Right. But speaking to that in particular, it's like, I guess the LAPD was in desperate need of some brand improvement, and so it was really critical that they didn't continue to compound that particular viewpoint of them. And you could say,
but also it's a celebrity and they're under the microscope. Like this shit's being filmed.
Sure. But I guess I just want to say that in a way it was a success, because he didn't kill himself, and it was resolved peacefully. And then I've got this quote, which again is pretty revealing of OJ, where when he finally does give himself up, and apparently he really one of the reasons he held off for so long is because he didn't want to be videotaped during daytime, so he kind of wanted the quiet anonymity of night to kind of just to feel less shame about the whole incident. So it's dark. He finally lets himself get apprehended, and as he's in the cop car, he sees like much of the black community, and he says, "What are all these niggers doing in Brentwood?" Yeah, that would allegedly he said
well,
that.
who's the source of that? Yeah, who's the source of that? I wonder.
You're right. It's apparently one of the cops.
Should we necessarily? Well, who said it? Who said it? Who said he said that?
I don't remember, but you're right. I'm glad you're bringing an asterisk to that, so we can say allegedly said.
Yeah,
and we can just keep it as a point of potential interest.
Yeah, I wonder. Like, we're supposed to trust LAPD to report his speech accurately. I don't.
Sure, fair point.
All right, let's carry on. So yeah, here are the three main players in this drama. You've got OJ, the alleged killer, and then the victims, Nicole Brown Simpson, his estranged wife. She wasn't quite his ex, was she? Or was she?
She was his ex at this point.
Or just estranged? I'm not an expert on the trial by any means. I'm just sharing and riffing on memories and impressions. And then you've got Ron Goldman, who was a friend, but apparently OJ suspected she was his lover. Nicole was his lover.
I'd like to know more about that. I thought you might be able to shine some light on that. I know that he was a waiter,
Ron
right,
Goldman,
at this restaurant.
He was a waiter at a restaurant she frequented. Yeah.
He was 20 years old, right?
Maybe there was some... okay, if you say so.
I think so. I'm just trying to have an understanding of who he was. No, I'm not saying that in any way. Like that that indicates that they weren't involved.
Yeah,
and I'm wrong, by the way.
She could have been the cougar.
It appears that he was 26 when he was 25 when he died. Okay.
How old was she?
She would have been like 35. Yeah.
Yeah. So she could have been the cougar in the equation.
Of course.
I mean, I don't know what their relationship was, but these are the three people that we're talking about, and there are, of course, more players in the drama as this goes to trial. So let's carry on. You've got here a slide of who is it? The patriarch of the Kardashian family reading a letter written by O.J. Simpson. Now, I don't know if you're going to read the whole thing, but maybe you can pick excerpts. This is Kardashian, of course, is a member of the Dream Team, the legal Dream Team, which included Dushowitz and was headed by Robert Shapiro.
Wait, seriously?
What?
I didn't even know he was a lawyer.
Who?
Kardashian.
Yeah, what did you think he was? Why is he reading the letter? I just thought he was like
a high-profile business friend.
No, he's part of that legal team.
He doesn't come up in the documentary like in the trial at all.
Well, that's who he is. There's another drama. Am I wrong about that? There's another drama in which David Schwimmer plays Kardashian. All right, he's Googling here to fact check. We got instantaneous fact checking.
You're right.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised because I don't know exactly like what his... I kind of like the documentary profiled kind of everyone's respective strengths, like they had a player for each aspect of the case, and he didn't come up. So I do know that he distanced himself from OJ later on and like said, "Oh, I wasn't really his friend. Like we met once or twice a year," which seemed to contradict the truth because they seemed to be hanging out all the time. Like they were really close buddies. So that was kind of snaky.
Yeah. No,
I guess
he was
I put this
part
in,
of
but I
that
want to
team.
know, like, sorry, I wanted to know, like, did you see him read this, like, live? Do you remember that?
Oh, I don't remember this. No.
Okay, and I'm
I
wondering, like,
I didn't follow it
why it was read.
closely.
You know,
Maybe
like,
to gain sympathy, to say, oh, the reason he fled is because he was agitated and anxious, so he wasn't in
I
his
guess
right
so.
mind.
I just think, yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. But I'm just saying, in a way, for me, it more incriminates him than anything. Because if it seems
Yeah,
like
well,
suicide would be something you do more out
but
of a feeling of guilt.
you're trying to change, as the legal team, you're trying to change the story because you got a guy who clearly looks guilty because he ran away. So you got to try something. Oh, here's this note. Which, do you want to read
Yeah,
an
but I'm
excerpt?
saying, I want to come back to this. Like, doesn't it seem like someone who's writing a suicide note? That doesn't seem to build up his case to me. That seems to, like,
Well, they're grasping at straws, man. They're just like hoping to change the topic from his flight in the white Bronco, I guess.
yeah. And as I said, I don't understand it well enough, because I can understand some rationale for a very powerful person not wanting to get arrested, although that's pretty stupid too. But this, just like someone wanting to end it, if they were really innocent, if they were really innocent, you would think that they would believe that they would have a case. They would be hard to frame them because they just were innocent. Like, you'd have alibis, you wouldn't be worried about your blood being mixed in, and so on. So you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't understand how the
Well,
suicide note is helping in any way.
tell us what the note says, or at least summarize it.
Okay, well, the first sentence is interesting because of what we'll discuss later in terms of the Othello parallels. But it starts with, first, everyone understand I have nothing to do with Nicole's murder. I loved her, always have and always will. If we had a problem, it's because I loved her so much. So Othello has a similar defense later on, which we'll see. We can keep going.
Okay.
Let me see if there's anything I want to pull out from here. Yeah, I think it's interesting here how he sort of, like, decided to chronicle his various relationships. So in, like, the third to last paragraph, it says, Marguerite, thanks for the early years. We had some fun. Like, this is like your ex-wife who you had kids with. Mm-hmm. And so just to reduce it to we had some fun is funny to me.
Yeah.
And then Paula, what can I say? That's like his present girlfriend. You are special. I'm sorry we're not going to have our chance. I don't know. And apparently, one of the reasons that he really went nuts the night of the murder is because he called Paula and she, like, doesn't answer. So it's like his rebound. It's not really fair to call her his rebound, but his present relationship is kind of not doing too well. Plus, he's got Nicole, who's finally, like, seems to have emotionally got over him, and it's like this double rejection that makes him go crazy. But just some thoughts. Okay, we can keep going.
Oh, beware, my lord of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on.
Exactly.
All right. Speaking of Othello.
Nice quote.
All right. I'm sorry for the Goldman family, he says towards the end of his note. I know how much it hurts. Nicole and I had a good life together.
That next paragraph is interesting. At times I felt like a battered husband, but I loved her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When in fact she was the battered partner, right? There was a history of,
and how does a
domestic
man
abuse
of his power see himself as a battered husband? I mean, emotionally, maybe he could feel that way, but it's hard to believe that. It's an interesting word to use.
Well, this is.
But I would say overall, it's quite articulate. You know.
Please think
I would
of
even
the
say,
real
like,
OJ and not this lost person. That's
Yeah.
an often quoted line. Thanks for making my life special. I hope I helped yours. Peace and love, OJ. Who's he writing it to? To whom it may concern is the addressee. So this is like an open letter to the world, I guess.
I mean, he shouts out 27 people, I believe. So one thing that I just think is interesting about OJ is that, he was always surrounded with people. His house was like a major party spot. And even after all the shit goes down and his Brentwood house is demolished and he moves to Florida, moves to Vegas, he always has like a posse around him. So in a way, like, he continued to be sociable, and you could argue that that gave him happiness and is kind of like healthy, like he wasn't someone who's sat Brian Wilson style brooding in his room. That's my point. For better or worse, maybe he needed some more introspection, but he lived it up.
All right, this is interesting. A Mark Lamont Hill quote. This is your slide, so take it away.
Yeah, an interesting quote. Metaphorically, he was using white vehicles to escape black reality, and Mark Lamont Hill is most explicitly speaking of the white Bronco, which apparently was owned by, I think, anyway, one of his business associates. It didn't actually belong to them, but then of course it refers to maybe much of his legal dream team as well, and other aspects of his life. But I don't know. You might be able to do more with that quote. Just thought it was cogently
No, let's
put.
just let it hang. I think it speaks for itself. All right, so the kangaroo court, the legal circus. Here are some of the major players. I remember Judge Lance Ito, Japanese American judge, and he presided over this kangaroo court. There's old Johnny Cochran. We'll mention him later. Who is this Sheck? Who is Sheck?
Sheck was one of their top science guys, so he basically is able to call into question a lot of the way that the LAPD dealt with the blood, and he accused a lot of it of being contaminated.
Witness
yes, and he really he did very well according to the documentary to totally confuse the jurors about how valid a lot of the DNA evidence was, which was crucial.
Key. Yeah. Well, here's F. Lee Bailey. I remember him as the host of a show in the 80s, I want to say, called Lie Detector. So he was a famous American lawyer, and he was recruited by Shapiro to be part of this dream team, the defense team.
It's just incredible to me because it's almost like you're forming a basketball team, and you've got someone for each position, and it's like, is there no limit? Can you have as many players as you want?
You got a deep bench. If you can afford it, if you're the New York Yankees, you can, buy a championship.
Really, you bring in someone for each position. Like Bailey was brought in to do cross-examination, it's like he's just a pinch hitter. He just comes in to fuck up what's his name? Furman. He really just makes a little brief cameo. He does it perfectly, and then he bows out. And it's like, it's like so crazy, that.
And I remember thinking at the time, is this even allowed? You can have 10 lawyers?
Right. Exactly.
I thought you just you had one. I mean, I guess that was before. I have to tell you, at this time, this will come up when we discuss the verdict, but at this time I was in paralegal school, or I should say I was taking a paralegal course. I'm a certificated paralegal, everyone. So I'm not allowed to give you legal advice, but I did work for lawyers for a brief period, and I know about that cesspool. So, yeah, I'll tell a story about that later when we discuss the verdict. But I was learning about the legal process at this time, and I remember the days when, um, if there was reporting on a legal case, they would have like sketches, you know. But then
Yeah.
it's like with OJ, everything was filmed. Like I thought there was a law or something. Maybe it was just a regulation or tradition, but I thought it was like not legally allowed to film courtroom scenes. But all that seems to have changed with OJ. Like everything became televised, right? And
Well,
this was
I'm
like the
not sure
beginning
about
of.
that.
Okay,
Okay, well, what
correct
I've
me.
heard about it, sure. No, I mean, not. It's not about correcting you. It's about trying to understand. Uh, One thing is regarding the case. It seems like both sides were fairly happy with it being filmed, and maybe it's to enhance their celebrity status. But the other reason, the rationale, is that it was teaching the public about how the justice system works. So it's like making you a more
Or doesn't work.
responsible citizen. Right, right. But somehow people were expressing like some disappointment that this precedent seems to have gone away. Like Trump's cases are not being aired the same way, and they're having to do sketches and stuff like that. So I don't know the details. I would love to kind of like figure out the policy,
Yeah.
but it's crazy. Like the documentary goes into just how much, OJ was a film star, so he already had some kind of like understanding of how to use cameras. And they said that like the placement of the cameras, OJ would always be aware of when the camera was on him. He would adjust his facial expressions for those moments. And they said that when the camera panned away, like his face would like look very different.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like another level of just absurdity.
Well, I mean, in some ways, this is like the beginning of reality TV. You know,
Yeah.
it was like the OJ case that started all that, for better or worse. I would argue for worse, but yeah. Well, continuing with this cast of clowns, we've got Marsha Clark. Marsha Clark, the well, was she the chief prosecutor or one of them? She was
Initially, I
on
think
the
she
other
was.
side.
Yeah.
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 I remember her with her frizzy hair, and then I don't know, later she straightened it, I guess.
She looks better now, to me.
Okay, if you say so. Now, who is Darden? Who's this?
So the prosecution brought on Darden once they realized kind of that the majority of the jury was black. So basically, they needed a black person. And
Is he a cop?
I don't know. I mean, he's a lawyer, you know.
Oh, he's a lawyer.
And yeah, he
Well,
was
then
like
he's not a
big
cop.
name in the
Okay.
prosecution's case. Like he's the one. Like what he's infamous for is against Marsha Clark's advice and others' advice. He went ahead and initiated the glove fitting, whereas everybody else in the prosecution was like, "Let's do this behind closed doors. There's a good chance it's not going to fit for different reasons because he was wearing latex. We'll learn other things about the fact that he stopped taking his arthritis medicine." So there were lots. Anyway, they kind of knew this was
It was
a
risky.
big gamble for them.
Yeah.
Massively risky. But he did it anyway. I think, I don't know. He thought that it was better to take the lead on it, but anyway, it was considered a massive mistake, and it was brought up as like a moment that I think Clark and Darden had the biggest fight over this particular issue. But he was also like, he got a lot of slack from the black community.
All right, then we've got the racist cop, Mark Furman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which we'll
We're
get
at
into,
cross
right?
purposes here. I think we've got some audio
Sure.
issues.
Sure.
I mentioned the
but,
racist cop, Mark Furman.
Yeah, I caught that. Yeah, so
Anything to
that's,
say about him?
Well, it ends up becoming the trial of Mark Furman, right? He just ends up usurping the whole trial, and was it fair? Probably not. But is it understandable? Yes. Like, is it understandable that the defense made so much of it? Totally. And
Yeah,
we'll get
of
into it.
course.
We'll get into that, right?
Yeah, then we've got this Joker named Kato Kalin. I remember he became famous for his appearances on court TV or whatever it was. I don't know if it was C-SPAN or whatever, but we see this long-haired wannabe Hollywood actor. Is that what he was doing there? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was a
from
house
Milwaukee. He was
guest.
trying to make it.
He was living with OJ, and he was like, he had some communication with OJ the night of the murder, so he was called as a witness, and then I think Marcia Clark had him designated as a hostile witness because he didn't really help the case. But I just remember him being kind of like clueless, like he was just kind of like a male bimbo. He's just kind of like, huh? What? Huh?
He was like Larry David's Leon.
Well, that's giving him too much credit, I think. Leon's
Sure. Just in terms of the
live-in
guest.
Yeah, the live-in aspect. Yeah. Okay, so then we've got Ron Goldman's father. I remember seeing him on TV all the time, and he was the force behind the civil case, which followed the criminal case, or one of the forces behind that.
Yeah, and for better or worse, like, he openly makes it his life goal to harangue OJ and never let him have a moment of peace. Would I want to devote my life to that? Probably not, but I don't want to judge him either.
If you had a kid that got murdered, you might.
That's why I'm saying I don't want to judge him.
Well,
at times it can seem kind of pathetic, to be honest. But just because, like, then you're just living, I wouldn't want my life to be focused on another person so much. But he was doing him, that's all I'm saying. And he was, like, in a way, his family were the real victims. I mean, that might sound unfair, but the point is that, like, Nicole Brown's family, they were still somewhat conflicted, right? Because OJ was the father of her children, and he ended up getting custody, but for the first, I think, couple years after Nicole's death and after the acquittal, like, they were sharing custody, so they were still, like, in communication.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you get the point, right? It was like they were friends. They had a relationship prior to this, but Goldman was just like, this guy, just random person who just, like, killed his kid.
Right. Yeah. Well, so the last photograph here in this rogues gallery is Brown. I assume that's Nicole's sister.
Yeah.
And I thought she didn't like OJ. I saw something.
She didn't, and she testified. I'm pretty sure she testified against him.
Yeah. In fact, when her family got the news, she said, "I knew it. That motherfucker finally killed her."
Yeah.
So I don't remember her name, but that was Nicole's sister. So this is your slide. You say OJ once signed 2,500 autographs in a single session to make money while in prison.
Yeah, I think the things that I want to, like, tease out of this are just that, like, once OJ's, like, kind of accepted that he's got a chance, or, like, he's past that initial, like, I'm gonna shoot myself phase, he ends up recovering pretty impressively. And one aspect that I wanted to highlight is the fact that he was still absolutely hustling financially. He realized, like, how much he was spending on this dream team, and he was like, he actually calculated how much he was making on autographs. It was like $150 a pop or something. So he could sit there in jail, and because he wasn't convicted yet, he was legally allowed to be like sending out autographs to memorabilia companies, and he was like hustling essentially, like he was making money while he was in the cell. And the other thing I wanted to point out is just that the documentary really also highlighted how active of a role he took in his own defense, so that he would be giving lots of pointers, lots of demands to his team. You can see how engaged he is physically during the testimonies, and the basic explanation that's given is like, this is a premium athlete who's now just seeing this as like a competition, and he's trying to be the best, and he's trying to win the game, and he's like, and he's good at like the hustle. So
what about the complicity of people that bought his shit, his memorabilia? Like they're helping finance the acquittal of a murderer, possibly, like, do they have any, how do they square that morally, I wonder, or do they care?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say the same thing for anyone watching and then like paying for the commercials, right? I mean, like, or the same argument was made for giving Trump so much airtime.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's for sure, it's an important point.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone's got to get paid. All right, let's carry on.
So
this is yours.
Obviously,
so
the composition of the jury is a huge talking point to the not guilty verdict, and just might be interesting for people to know that the jury was composed of 9 black people, 1 Hispanic, 2 whites, 10 women, 2 men. Vast majority only at a high school education. And some other interesting facts. 9 of them thought that Simpson was less likely to be a murderer because he was a professional athlete. So it seems like in the interviews of Marcia Clark about the jury selection, like, she quickly decided she had to cut her losses because like the applicants were getting kind of like more and more, like, trying to think what the politically correct word could be, but like regressive. They were having trouble finding people that, first of all, that could financially or like were willing to give up like 7 months of their life. And she had been successful apparently in the past connecting with black women. So she kind of hoped that her, we've got like 2 issues at stake, right? You've got like woman to woman, like appealing appealing by gender or appealing by race.
Mm-hmm.
And the ultimate, what's the word I'm looking for?
Criterion.
Sure, but like what ended up like being confirmed by this is just that how race is actually like a much more powerful tool than like it resonates. Yeah, people identify much more strongly by race than they do by gender, especially black people.
Okay.
I mean, I think I would agree with that as well.
You've got a photo here of one of the
this
jurors.
Is very interesting. So we know that the case becomes increasingly about race, whereas perhaps that wasn't the initial vision of the Dream Team, especially not of Cochran. But once the tapes come out, then it's like gonna be about that. Like that was just, and we'll talk about that in a second, but Cochran really plays this up, and in the closing statement it gets to just hysterical degrees of this being like just all about civil rights. And obviously jury members should not do this, but one jury member like raised his hand in like Black Power salute after delivering the not guilty verdict. And Marsha Clark says that they discovered afterwards that he was a Black Panther. So it's pretty funny. Like they had no idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's another reference to the Kardashians. Here's an old photo of the kids with the patriarch. Can you recognize the sisters? Who's this?
I don't know any of this Kardashian shit, but I know like one of them's Kim, obviously.
Well, this one's Kim, I think. This is before before the sex tape and before surgery. This is I don't know, the posh one. Is that Courtney or Chloe? I can't remember. And then that's the other one. I think she's the chunkier one. And this boy, I don't know, they had a brother too. What's that? I'm an asshole?
Yeah. The chunky one. That's her spice name?
I said chunkier. Okay. It's okay. It's all relative. Who's the boy? I don't even know. But that's another thing. Speaking of reality television, I mean, OJ gave us the Kardashians too, so
right.
Quite a legacy he has. All right. So what's this about? This is your slide. The jurors were allegedly unmoved by domestic violence evidence. Okay.
Yeah, I mean this is how the prosecution came out swinging with. They had a lot of tapes, 911 tapes of Nicole in incredible duress. Shocking episodes where he's got a baseball bat in one of them and he's breaking down doors. I mean, for me, this is the most compelling evidence that he killed. I mean, if you can do this, for me, you're not far away from a murder. So someone that gets into those states of mind with his wife, it's not hard for me to then picture the next gradation. But the prosecution was surprised that they didn't really read that much reaction. And in some of the jury's interviews afterwards, they said that like they didn't really one of the jurors said she doesn't respect a woman who gets beaten and stays with the man, like stays in that situation. So it's like
victim blaming.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for that. Like, yeah, women should get away from a situation like that in some way. And there's the gay thing I was referencing, by the way, right? Like the Hawaii gay man kissed Justin, OJ threw me against walls in our hotel and on the floor. Yeah, so just for me, it's just this also is supposed to like not like you come into the case, you've got OJ the football god, and this very quickly is supposed to show that regardless, this is a flawed man. You know, before we get to the murder or not, like you should not be seeing him with this halo.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like a logical strategy.
Yeah, but it wasn't
That's
too
all
effective.
I have to say about that.
All right, well, famously, Johnny Cochran, one of the lawyers who had a penchant for rhyming, said, I'll let you... this part of the podcast is called Complete the Sentence. If the glove doesn't fit... That's your cue, man.
No, I'm supposed to like leave it for the listener.
Oh,
and then we give them the answer afterwards.
All right. Oh, I see. Save that for the show notes. Yeah, if you don't know that, then you just haven't been paying attention.
By the way, according to the show, Cochran didn't think of this, but it was, I can't remember who did, but it was like, you know, again, one of these things where like, they're in this big meeting room and like somebody gets it and it's like, shit, that's it. You know, like they're coming up with jingles.
Look at the smirk on OJ's face.
People said this is, he really like got into his Naked Gun character for this, according to the documentary. Like as soon as he realized what he had, you know, he just started like really hamming it up. Raw, raw, raw. I don't know. Like, do you think what is the actual deal with that? Like, do you think those were his gloves? And He was just able to make it seem like they were too small?
I don't know. In fact, you mentioned what? He stopped taking medication, so his hand may have been enlarged. Maybe it was planted there. I mean, I don't have an opinion on that because I haven't looked into it. But I mean, clearly
there was a receipt. They had someone say that like these were definitely Nicole's gloves because like they had a receipt and they were only like 300 sold, 300 pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So, but whether he used them, I don't know what to make of all that.
If they were hers, you wouldn't think that they would fit him, right? But
maybe they don't need to fit like super well to take care of some business, you know?
Yeah.
I've worn too tight gloves sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I've borrowed my mother-in-law's gloves.
Have you ever killed anybody?
No, I have not.
You are under oath, according to podcast etiquette, so be careful.
Of course.
Anything you say can and will be used against you. Of course, you can also plead the fifth. Because we're Americans. All right, carrying on. Here's our racist cop, Mark Furman.
Yeah,
this is your slide, so take it away.
Okay, but please jump in. Well, Fred Goldman, fairly, he comments that this is now the Furman trial. It's not the trial of O.J. Simpson, who is accused of murdering my son and Nicole. So, can you go to the next slide really quickly?
Well, what about your Dave Chappelle Furman German? You're going to just gloss over that?
Yeah, but I want to lead in with the next slide.
All right.
Can you think of it?
Carl
Douglas was, he was also on the defense. He's pretty charismatic guy. I liked his appearances on the documentary. And he just says, like, it was pennies from heaven. We'd been given a gift when they discovered these tapes. And it's just, it's so funny, right? Like how you're given these despicable tapes, which Cochran will later say is like the most vile thing he's heard in like, you know, in the court in 30 years. And yet you're also like, thank you, Jesus, that you got this shit, you know? Of course I get it. I'm not saying he's wrong to say this, but so Furman obviously said some horrible, horrible things. He was a pretty, he's a bad guy. Interestingly, like he still seemed to have a pretty successful career after this. He was, I mean, not interesting. I mean, I know you'll say it's like
not surprising,
expected.
Yeah,
but he becomes like a major Fox correspondent. So he denies that, or he says that I guess that was like a previous incarnation that was like a very flawed man, and that he was drawn from it. He insists that
I saw him say, "I had a bad couple of years there, but it is what it is." That's what he said in that documentary.
Also, I think some of the explanation was that he was like, because he was helping this lady with her screenplay, and he says like, "Oh, I was reading like parts from the screenplay."
Sure, he was.
But the lady who was interviewing him at the time, like, was called to the stand, and she said, "No, he meant all this shit in like a really."
He was the inspiration for the screenplay, maybe.
Exactly.
I think I heard this on the Thaddeus Russell podcast, but I hope I've got this right. But I heard that he moved to white supremacist Idaho, where he currently resides. If that's wrong, then please.
I tried to fact check that and couldn't find anything.
Okay.
Yeah. But and I told you equally that he fantasized about basically joining a South African militia, like while the apartheid was going on, so that he could beat the shit out of black people, like with free reign.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But if I've misrepresented you, Mr. Furman, I'm so sorry. If that last part about you living in Idaho, and to all our listeners in Idaho, and I know there are many, many of you, no disrespect, maybe. I love your potatoes. All right, let's keep keep moving. Who's Danny Bakewell?
Okay, so Danny Bakewell is prominently featured in the documentary. He's physically like the whitest black guy I've ever seen, but he definitely identifies as black. And during the time of the trial, a major civil rights issue becomes whether or not to disclose the content of the tapes to the jury. So it's like all the public knew about this shit. But there's a fascinating moment in the courtroom, and I'd love your take on this. I don't know if it was in the episode you've seen, but basically the prosecution, and namely, what's his name? I forgot the black dude's name.
Cochran.
Do you? No, on the prosecution. Darden. He argues that they should not be admissible because black people are so triggered by the term that it would cloud their judgment of the case from then on. Like it would just like paralyze them. And you're kind of sympathetic to his point of view until I kind of got it. And then and then Cochran responds just like, and he absolutely ethers him, saying like, do you realize like how racist you're being right now to like black people? Like saying that we can't handle, like we're so, based and so
emotionally volatile.
Yeah, that like and it's one of those things where actually Darden may have been right, but also Cochran was right. So it's like he really embarrassed Darden in that moment, and he was a better orator, so it was definitely considered like Darden taking an L. And in the end, I think they did only allow like 5 or 10% of the tapes to be played. It was enough to kind of get the tenor across, but just that whole issue. I mean, you got so many, like, if we're talking about this as like a Shakespearean play, you've got just so many episodes that are fascinating, like the tapes. What do you, any reaction to this particular
Well, no,
issue?
I didn't listen to the tapes, and this is the first I'm hearing about Danny Bakewell, so I don't have much to say on that. But this is what a quotation from Mr. Bakewell.
Oh, but I'd like to know your general thoughts on the way that Furman affected the focus of the case.
I remember at the time that it, it clearly, I mean, he was on trial in a way, as Ron Goldman's father said. It did become more about that, which, after Rodney King is not surprising, right? Like, as a representative of LAPD, I mean, Mark Furman was the poster boy. So, and what else do you want me to say about it?
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, the other really interesting thing is, so he's initially called up by the prosecution, and I think he responds to both sides, and he just kind of like talks about, being the first one on the scene and finding the glove and so on. And then I guess they find the tapes after
planting the glove. Did you say?
Yeah. Well, so they find the tapes like after his first testimony, and then he takes the second time that he's called up, and the LAPD reps who are interviewed say that was like a huge mistake as well. Like an LAPD officer, like avoiding speaking about crime. Like, and then that's when they brought on Bailey, and they asked Bailey, like, so did you plant the glove? And he took the fifth on that, which was just like the other LAPD guys were like, you fucking idiot. You could have said something at that point, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So you can understand like how fucked the prosecution's case was when like you got your LAPD guy saying, I don't know if not saying no to the fact that he planted the glove. That's just crazy.
Yeah, that's
mm-hmm. Okay, so this last speech is just like, it's interesting how it's really become 95% of Cochrane's final statement is just cloaked in the language of like a Martin Luther King speech, where it gets to the point where he even like refers to Hitler,
Right.
and compares Furman to Hitler, and tells the jury that this is like your moral duty to put an end to racism and the
Genocidal
victimization of
racism.
black people. Yeah, and it's like, is this going too far? We'll talk about that very soon.
All right, we should probably try
On
to
this
wrap
edition
things
of
up.
Texting.
Yeah, we should
You
try
wish.
to wrap things up soon. All right. So, yeah, I just wanted to point out that another cultural touchstone is the parody of the Johnny Cochran character in Seinfeld, right? Jackie Childs, who I think defends Kramer in a couple of cases, but he also has a penchant for rhyming, right? Your face is my case, and if it's black and blue, you got to sue. Interesting side note.
Nice.
Was playing the race card dishonorable? So that was your question that I think you wanted to
and that's
explore.
my question for you, Mark Will.
Well, I mean, it's from what standpoint? Am I part of the legal dream team or what?
Well, that's the other interesting part of this question.
When
is
you
that
ask me this
do we
question,
see...
like it's just common sense. You got to do it. Like you got to fire all your guns, you know? Shoot
and
off
that's
all
my
your
question,
missiles.
though. That's my question. Like, if you're a lawyer, is your only responsibility to win, or is there an aspect of like you want to win the right way?
Well, in this,
You know what I'm saying? That's the
again,
crucial question.
You're asking. Well, it's not either or, right? Like, I think you can do both. You want
It
to
kind
win.
of is either or, though. In this case,
No, you can. You want to win, of course, but you can do so. I don't think it's, you know. I guess my answer to the question is no. It's not dishonorable. Like it's just, you would be negligent. You would be like not fulfilling your duties as a member of the defense team to not play it. Like it's just,
okay. So then, win
Yeah.
at all costs, basically, is what you're saying.
no. Like, is that irrelevant? Is that like not an issue in this case?
Well,
I mean, as
again, Shapiro was shocked. You know, absolutely. Like he said, "I won't comment." Like they interviewed him right after the case, and they said, "What do you think about how much the race is being played?" When you said, apparently he made comments at the beginning of the trial, like saying, "I don't want this to be, I don't want race to be like the major issue," and he said, "I won't comment until after the verdict." You know, because he's watched Cochran's performance, and then after the verdict, he's upset about it. He says, "I'll never work with Cochran again."
maybe he's jealous.
He said he advised against it.
Maybe he's jealous that he got upstaged. He was supposed to be the hero, and then turned out that Cochran got more attention.
Yeah, it could be. It's just, I think, I don't know. I think there's argument to be made that it got, it gets to the point where it is like if you're just making, it's like
weaponizing identity politics
and weaponizing the Holocaust, right? I mean, this is what Netanyahu's doing right now, saying that
right.
America looks like Germany in the 1930s.
Oh God, how absurd! Yeah, I mean,
everybody does, right?
Well, yeah. Now when you
Putin
put it,
says the same shit.
Well, now when you put it like that, maybe I'd have to reconsider. But just as a member of the defense team, first of all, who's going to be a lawyer, like, or even a paralegal, as I tried to be. But yeah, there are limits. For example,
I don't know. That's a bit unfair.
Well, no, I'm saying some of these issues come up, and you're asking, do you win? Is it necessary to win at all costs? Like there's some, I think I've mentioned before that I'm assisting someone with a case here in Taiwan, and that we have some evidence that it would be beneficial. It would have been beneficial to, make public, but some of it was provided to us in or confidentially, right? And so we could have burned the people that provided this confidential evidence. And actually, this was true of a case I had here as well. Like, I knew some things that I could have shared, which would have been useful to me, but I didn't. I withheld that because it could potentially harm other people, and that's my adversary was completely shameless, and they would have burned anyone. It did, in fact, they incriminated people on their side without any regard for the consequences, and I felt like I was fighting with both hands tied behind my back, actually, and in a way, in this case, it's the same thing, but we discussed it and we decided, no, we're not going to do that. That's not exactly the same, but if the larger question is, do you win at all costs, then, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, who suffers if you're in that final planning session with when Cochrane is crafting this speech and he says, I'm going to make a Hitler comparison.
Mm-hmm.
What's the downside to that?
Oh, it's just
like, because we don't like it aesthetically in a way, right? Or like intellectually we don't like it.
Yeah.
But if he thinks like that's going to be the most kind of like pathos strong argument for these jurors, I don't know. I'm just trying to think out loud right now. Like, what would be the argument against about to say to him, hey man, I think like let's scale it back a little bit. We can talk about race, but we don't have to go to like the Holocaust here. Would it be just out of
I think that's
taste?
called the argumentum ad Hitlerum, It's like when you've lost the argument, well, as it says here, get out of any argument free. Just invoke Hitler in the Holocaust or race or whatever.
Right. So it's like you could say it's like a rhetorical fallacy, right?
Yeah.
But I just wonder,
Did you say phallus?
Fallacy.
Oh, fallacy. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, come on. We gotta move here. Like,
all right. We'll talk about this after. But I think this is the shit. This is the interesting shit more so than the biography.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it to the viewers. Like, what do you think? Was playing the race card dishonorable? Okay. We'll leave that to you. All right. So here's the verdict, and we've got a picture here, and there's a clear split. What do you see in this picture? A picture says 1,000 words. What does it say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's pictures that are even more evocative of the reaction, but yeah, the answer that you're spoon feeding me, Mark, is that the black people were happy and the white people were not.
Well, this is how it was at the time, right? Like the reactions were along color lines, and I remember at the time thinking, okay, I mentioned I was in a paralegal course, and they had been telling us, all our teachers were like, oh, we heard that, we know people involved in this case, and they told us that there's never been so much incriminating evidence ever in the history of American jurisprudence. So we're very certain he's going to be convicted. And so when the verdict was read, they wheeled in this TV and they showed the class. And then, and there actually among our class, there were some black students, mostly white, but a few black students, and they seemed like, pleased with the result. And some of the Karens in the class were like, huh? And then I was just like, why are these people so concerned about the fate of a man that they don't know personally. That was my reaction at the time. Maybe I'd have a more sophisticated understanding now, but I remember clearly thinking that, like, what, I'm supposed to be on Team White or Team Black? Like, I don't know. I wasn't there. I haven't been paying that much attention, but, like, you know, if it's, I do remember, like, repeating what my teacher said. Oh, well, he's certainly going to be convicted because my teacher said so. That was totally naive. But I just assumed that, well, I made up my mind when he fled. I saw him fleeing in the white Bronco. Well, why the fuck's he running away? He's probably guilty. But that was also naive. Like, maybe there were other factors. But then, as now, I assumed he was guilty. So maybe I was surprised, but was I, like, emotionally shattered? Like, oh my God, my faith in the American justice system has been destroyed. No, of course not. I mean, I already didn't believe in it. And I already had experiences of my own with cops that were very unpleasant, Like, I'd been harassed by cops because I had long hair or was a teenager or wore a trench coat and looked suspicious. I mean, Texas cops, like, fuck them. They're probably just as bad as LAPD. So I could also,
They're definitely not impressing right at the moment at UT.
yeah, right, there you go. And take it back to the 80s and beyond, of course, but I'm just talking from personal experience. But that was my that was my overall impression. Like, why are people so emotionally invested in, the fate of this man that they clearly don't know personally? I have a different view now, but
yeah, I mean, if you're a black person living in LA,
I certainly
there's
wasn't
plenty of reasons to be
White
invested.
Team Black, for that matter. But that was noted at the time, and I think Mark Lamont Hill emphasized that again, and the of course the context. I do also remember seeing Rodney King being beaten on TV, and in fact, I was in a dorm at the time, a college dorm, and there was like a public TV room, and there were a lot of black students in there watching the beating. They were, of course, furious, and like the cops would come on and talk, and they'd be like, "Yeah, bullshit," I could feel the rage, and what can you say about it? Of course, rightly so. So, and I looked it up today. Like Straight Outta Compton, "Fuck the Police," that came out in the late '80s, '87, I think, '88. So there was already this history of, racialized policing. So, maybe OJ was not the best case study. Obviously, he got the reverse treatment, right? If he was a Rodney King type suspect, they would have chased him down and beat the fuck out of him. But instead, they escorted him home. I'm talking about the chase again.
Yeah, I get you.
But yeah, I don't know. I've just babbled on, so say whatever you want to say in response.
Thank you. No, I mean, like, I think just it's interesting that both of us seem to completely sympathize with the reaction from the black community, and at the same time, it is like completely ridiculous that, and again, I'm not saying that in like a dismissive way, but it's ridiculous. It's just like an indictment of our society that, like, race is so, like, it's all about race, right? It's not about this man who killed these two people.
Well,
it's like
it's
a chance to. Well, it's like we want to win the games, like
yeah, team
right?
sport.
It's
Well,
like exactly.
it's like we're all in prison and we all have to join a gang based on our race. This is something that
Exactly.
Kurt Metzger points out often. You know, it's like, oh, that's the point of all this um, hyper attention given to race, right? Like everyone has to fit in their little category and be on their team and have certain alliances. Um, but there was something else I wanted to say about this, but I forget. So let's move on. Yeah, so this is another interesting cultural touchstone. Like during the trial and after, the comedian Norm Macdonald um relentlessly hammered OJ. Like he was the host of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, and it was nothing but OJ Simpson jokes, and this eventually led to his firing by Don Ohlmeyer, who was a personal friend of OJ's. He kept warning, you know, I guess Lorne Michaels and Norm Macdonald himself, like, stop making OJ jokes, but Norm would not do it. So that you can, maybe I'll include a link in the show notes to like a compilation of his OJ jokes. They're hilarious, you know. Like after
They
the
are
verdict,
hilarious, but I will say,
yeah,
Norm gets close to like. I love Norm, but there could be a bit of a racist inside of him. I will say that.
okay, well,
Like, yeah.
Well, I just remember one in that compilation. It's like, apparently murder is now legal in the state of California immediately after the verdict. But anyway,
Nice.
here's a meme. In a way, OJ got the last laugh because Norm died first, right? But then in death, Norm's fans are posting memes with jokes that Norm would have made had he survived. It says, O.J. Simpson's family announced that he died today at the age of 76 from cancer. Cancer has denied all allegations and has vowed never to rest until it finds the real killer. So that's in the manner of Norm.
And I think, by the way, just speaking of like never resting until you find the real killer, like that's another reason why it's kind of slightly absurd to me that you could acquit. Like, there was never any other person, right, whose name was brought up, or like any other. And OJ said he's gonna. I mean, that's even separate, but that's one thing. And then the second thing is just like OJ said, "Oh, I'm gonna spend my life searching for the killer," and then he just ends up just playing golf. You know. Like,
well, you reminded me of something there. Okay, so I told you about the paralegal class, and there was this reaction, right? There was one guy, an elderly white gentleman. I mean, this guy was MAGA before there was MAGA, I'm pretty sure. But he said, I'm not surprised. I always suspected it was the mob. OJ didn't do this. He was framed by the mob. Where he got that, I don't know, but that was his theory. And so,
okay.
For what it's worth, just put it out there. All right. So finally, I'm going to let you, I don't know if this is the last slide.
No, Mark. No.
This is your song, "The Story of OJ," or is
it's not my
here?
song. It's
Da
I think you may be as familiar with it as I am.
What do you mean? This is a Jay-Z song.
I mean, I understand, but you seem familiar with it. You're the one who brought it up, and like I like the song, but
well, tell us what you like about it and connect it to this. Is it unfair? Is it an unfair question?
No, of course not. It's just like I don't feel like I'm that well versed to speak about it. I haven't listened to it in a while. I think the outstanding thing from the song is like Jay-Z, massive black icon, very successful, but making the point in this song that he is above all a black man in America. So he's like satirizing OJ's idea that you can be beyond black. I don't know what to say beyond that. What do you want to say about it?
Well, there's a nice Nina Simone sample. That's one thing.
It's a great song. I like it a lot.
One thing I noticed
like,
about it,
and especially because it comes in this like later part of Jay-Z's career where he hasn't really like, in my opinion, like come at the level that he used to in his heyday. So it was like cool to see Jay.
That's one way to look at it, but then there's like a glorification of wealth, which I find distasteful. You know, it's like
Sure.
It's like, look at what the Jews did. We can do that too. So I don't know. I
don't know.
I don't know
I think
either.
It's a pretty interesting video if I remember, but yeah, sorry.
Well, there's that.
That's the analysis listeners come for.
Yeah. I don't know. We're just two creeps on a Skype call. We don't know jack shit about anything. We're textual deviants. You know. Well, yeah, it's an interesting video with that, like, I don't know, those racist cartoon characters, or I don't know, outdated in any case.
That Sambo aesthetic.
Yeah. Okay, I thought you had more to say about that since you're the resident hip hop authority.
I am, but I instead decided to devote my entire Friday and Saturday to watching the documentary.
Fair enough. Take us home here with your Horatio Alger parallel.
You can do this as well. I put this because you are I'm repaying the favor.
Oh.
So I got a literary reference for you.
Okay.
And I thought you might be able to take it from there. So
all right, well, this is a quote from the guy you referenced before, Lipsight, who you say is a journalist. I don't know him, but his comment is his meaning OJ's Horatio Alger's story was based on him being a pleasing person to white people. Okay, so that was his American dream, to be accepted by white society and in that way transcend his blackness. I mean, that's one guy's opinion. I don't really feel qualified to.
I mean, OJ seemed to speak to that, though. You know.
Well, if
OJ seemed to confirm that many times.
If those statements are true, you know, then
there's a lot of statements from OJ like in the documentary. It's not a one-time thing where.
Yeah, well,
you know,
then that's
he says things in.
Yeah, then that's
similar vein.
That's quite possible. But you know, was he like? He didn't strike me as being like ashamed of his blackness, or he didn't like. Well, I guess from certain comments you could say he. I don't know that he expressed shame. Did he? It's more like just that's not.
Here's one interesting thing that came up, fascinating, I thought, that I forgot to mention earlier, but somehow the defense convinced Judge Ito to allow for like a excursion to OJ's house to like visit the seat of the crime, you know, or whatever, not the scene of the crime, just to visit the location. And OJ's house was actually just covered in photos with him with white people. Oh yeah, and I told you this, yeah. And they managed to like get into the house, remove pretty much 90% of the photos, replace them with like OJ with black people, and they even took a painting out of Cochran's office, which is like a, you know, very evocative civil rights style painting, and just like completely revamped the house. I was like shocked that this kind of stuff is allowed. You know? Anyway, so,
well, that speaks to the circus atmosphere, you know, that Judge Ito
and OJ
presided over.
Later on, seems to say like he seems to apologize to black people like in public appearances and kind of say that like I know I let you guys down, but I'm not going to do that again. So it's yeah, I mean, because they saved him, really, right? Despite him kind of not wanting to identify himself with his race so much.
Well, I still go back to Mark Lamont Hill's comment on Piers Morgan's so-called show. He says, you know, this is how, I guess this is my summation, my final statement to the jury, but he says this is how the justice system, criminal justice system, is supposed to work, right? Like it's better that one guilty person go free than that 10 innocent people be wrongly convicted. I tend to agree with that. Like he freely admits, he's like, "Oh, you ask me, I think OJ was definitely guilty, but the prosecution fucked up and LAPD fucked up, and so this is how the system works, right? Like if you don't like it, change the system, but that's what we got." And
But then we should change the system.
okay,
I don't know. Like,
no, but consider that standard. Isn't it better that one guilty person go free than that 10 innocent people be condemned?
that's a tricky one.
Oh, is it?
Wait. Well, not that ratio.
Okay.
That ratio, I agree with you. But if you say, is it better for 10 guilty people to be set free versus one innocent?
Okay.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like, would you rather not make any mistakes and have everyone who's guilty just out?
It's not either or.
Because you could make a mistake.
Yeah, I feel that.
No, but there's a gray is the point.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I was going to say something too, but I forgot.
Yeah, I'm running out of steam as well. So, all right, you've got an Othello slide here. This is a callback to episode 40, which was the last episode of season 2. And of course, our topic was Othello, and there are clear parallels there. So,
and also, like, I'm thinking of Richard Wright's Native Son. I think even Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This like whole like black man, white blonde woman, and like the potential there for violence is like a pretty famous trope. Yeah, I mean, we've introduced it, and let's get into it a little bit more. Like, I want to know just like where we categorize OJ in terms of some ways that we think about tragedy. So let's keep moving.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm glad
you're
to hear you say that.
Resident tragedian.
Okay.
So I'll read. I know you're short on endurance, but I still have a little bit of power. So, Othello, a Moorish general in the Venetian army, was married to a beautiful, fair-skinned woman considerably younger than he was. In time, he grew violently jealous, a powerful weakness of character for one who had earned such a noble and strong reputation. OJ, a Hall of Fame running back, was also married to a beautiful, fair-skinned woman who was considerably younger than he.
Fair-skinned.
And like Othello, fair-skinned. And like Othello, he had grown over the years progressively jealous and abusive, a shocking weakness of character for one who was universally perceived as a hero. Let's keep going.
O.J. Simpson, the Othello of our times.
After he slays Desdemona, Othello says, "Speak of me as I am, nothing extenuate, nor set down aught in malice. Then you must speak of one who loved, not wisely, but too well." And Orenthal James Simpson, in an updated reflection of the famous Moor's final dramatic words, writes in a letter read by his friend Robert Kardashian, "I loved her, always have and always will. If we had a problem, it's because I loved her too much."
Wow, that is a pretty interesting parallel. I hadn't thought of that. Well done that you found those. Yeah.
I mean, I just think this was a murder of passion. I think we can agree.
Oh, he's guilty? Right? You're saying that definitively?
He's guilty. He's guilty, and this was a murder of passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Let's keep going.
Okay, keep going.
I think I have some specific
questions.
Oh,
wordplay. MJ and OJ. All right. That's all you.
This is another strand that I wanted to explore, but yeah, just the whole idea of like, I'm all over the place now, but like major black icons taking huge falls is like depressing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You got how many? We're gonna start listing them off. Bill Cosby.
One of these Hey,
Tiger Woods.
one of these guys doesn't look so black in this picture, but carry on.
Tiger Woods, Michael Jackson, R. Kelly. I mean, Black Genius. Who else? Puff Daddy now. Biggie shot. Tupac shot. MLK shot. Malcolm X shot. Like, it's so just the whole idea of like, no matter what, like you're taken down somehow as a black icon. I don't know. It's just depressing, and I don't know. I could get into that more later, but the fall from grace is like the main thing I wanted to like point out about MJ.
Yeah, well, another day in the life of America, spelled with 3 Ks.
Yeah, exactly.
According to some members of the hip hop community. Is that an Ice Cube thing? I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, yeah, here we go. So you've got the reference to Greek tragedy and catharsis. And you had asked me in a text, but what was the catharsis, you know? What was it?
Yeah,
I said, as a question, the acquittal, maybe? Maybe that's the emotional release that people sought from the tragedy. Although it did, it wasn't.
And so
a satisfactory
obviously
release
that offered
for everyone.
No, but that you're right. Like, and that's like I think a really important first like thought. They say first thought, best thought, according to Kerouac. But okay, so let's just step back and view this from like a eating popcorn sense of like we're watching like the great epics of our day, but now they're presented in a different way than Shakespeare. We're getting it through this like courtroom performance, and so we're looking at the whole like life was a stage, whatever. So, and we're seeing him as overall like this tragic figure, let's say, right? He's like the great tragic figure of our day, let's say. So we leave a play in theory at the end, and you get the catharsis at the end, despite everybody being like slayed on stage, right? Or slain.
Thanks for the correction there.
It's slain, yeah?
Yeah. That would be the past participle.
I thought about that, but like slayed would be past simple, no?
Yeah, but you said everybody is
being. Yeah. So everyone being slayed. Yeah, so the third form. Okay. So, but my simple brain is like trying to understand, first of all, why do we feel catharsis again? Like if we're at the end of Hamlet and we see the bloodbath at the end, where's the catharsis there? Like how are we supposed to get catharsis? Can you just remind me how catharsis? Because I know I could talk over you, and that's not really fair. So let me have you talk first, and then I'll just tell you my little like understanding of catharsis.
Please talk over me. I mean, in the case of Hamlet, like we're happy to see Claudius slain, and we feel this definition here refers to the pity and fear. I'm just thinking of like emotional release. We think that justice has been done in a way, so Claudius is killed, and then I don't know if we get much of a catharsis from seeing what's Ophelia's brother's name?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
Shakespeare.
It's a bit too late in the
Laertes.
Yeah, Laertes, son of Polonius. I almost said Laertes. It's 3 a.m. here, so it's a bit late for me. But yeah, I don't know, the pity and fear would be aroused with the death of Hamlet, and then he commissions Horatio to tell his story. I don't know what else. What do you want to say about this in relation to OJ?
Okay. So I'm just saying, if OJ is really like a tragic figure, we should get some kind of like almost like moral cleansing, moral palate cleansing through his final demise, right? Like something, we should get some spiritual experience from the conclusion of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is that kind of like spiritual buzz or high that we can?
Well,
like,
maybe
I got it very strongly.
Maybe it goes
Go on.
back. Yeah. Now I'm talking over you. Maybe it goes back to that.
That's fine.
Maybe it goes back to that initial quote, which refers to the mess of America. You know, like it's just emblematic, indicative. It reminds us of what a vulgar hodgepodge of blood and racism and, you know, genocide and settler colonialism, along with democratic ideals and imperialism, and it's just like okay, it's, you know, another thing Shakespeare said, if we're talking about him, is that the purpose of playing, this is also from Hamlet, is to hold the mirror up to nature, right? So we kind of get a cathartic emotional release just from seeing the reflections of ourselves. And so this Made in America story tells us a lot about the American experience, the U.S. American experience. Does that make sense?
I think that's the answer. That's the answer I wanted, Professor.
Oh,
really? That's a good answer.
I'm so relieved. Does that mean we can stop?
I was just gonna say,
yeah.
What's the my favorite play of all time? The Beckett play. What's the famous Beckett? Waiting for Godot. I say, fucking crazy catharsis from Godot, that. By the way,
you say Godot, I say Godot, but yeah, what?
Yeah, just that. We can maybe make that a text some other time, because that I got such a feeling of catharsis out of that, and for me that defines catharsis.
Okay.
Just because it just showed me like, yes, life, this kind of like failure to find the answer, that is life, and it was showing me that was the mirror that I was getting, like, yes, you know. But for me that's an easier, more palatable form of catharsis than I get from OJ. That's all I'm saying.
There's an interesting, since you mentioned Waiting for Godot.
It's Godot, by the way, but anyway.
Godot. There's an interesting, well, where does that come from? We talked about this before. Why that name?
Okay, fuck it.
Why that name? Okay. Some say it's
the god, right?
Yeah, but then the OT is French, water. So a little bit of trivia there. But there's a line, one of them, Vladimir or Estragon says, you know, what are we doing here? That is the question, which is a nice play on to be or not to be. That is the question. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not that much of a simpleton.
No, I mean at the time do you remember that?
Oh, I don't know.
I remember when I saw it performed live. I remember being struck by that, like a little Shakespearean jab. All right.
And interesting that OJ himself said this bottom line in this slide. You've got to have tragedy in your life to really write an interesting autobiography.
Okay.
So maybe he ended up finding a way to romanticize his own like ugly situation.
Maybe he's a Shakespearean hero after all. Okay, well, this is you again.
Okay, well, yeah, just wondering, like, the tragic hero is usually sympathetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Hamlet is very sympathetic to the audience. I don't know if OJ is necessarily sympathetic, so I don't know if we can really call him a tragic hero. That's my point, I guess, because like going from tragedy, well, where's the tragic hero in the tragedy? And or is he an anti-hero, or is he just a pure villain? Like, and I know we could say he's all these things, but still, that's
this is an
interesting quote here too. Yeah, go on.
I was going to read it. An anti-hero is just a villain you spend a lot of time with. I like that. I'm right now watching or rewatching the series on Tom Ripley, Patricia Highsmith's character from, well, you may have seen the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, but there's a series of 5 novels called The Ripleyad, and he's definitely a villain, but he becomes the kind of anti-hero that we're almost sympathetic towards. Anyway, we're really babbling, so
okay,
let's wrap this up. The OJ effect. Go ahead, you can read this.
They just have a very interesting, like, the documentary as it traces his later years post prison, so his very late years, or I'm not even sure, I think it's his post prison years, but he just kind of continued to have a type of charisma with people, and that was like quite interesting. Also, some people would find it alarming that he'd still have women all around him. In one of the clips I sent you, like, he's at a party and he's like, I have more women now, I get more attention now than I did before. And Wendy Williams, I believe is her name, she's like a prominent black radio talk show host, kind of like Breakfast Club type vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an interview where she's interviewing OJ like way later, and he's got so much charisma. She just like says to him like, I like you, OJ, I shouldn't be saying this, but I just like all the jokes between the two of them was just about how powerful his charisma was as like a kind of anti-hero at this point. And
think of
so that's just interesting.
Think of all the fangirls that for example Charles Manson had, or that happens often. Like, men on death row get these women chasing after them, and they like marry them while they're still in prison, and they have conjugal visits. That's not an uncommon thing, apparently. But anyway, this is from the Urban Dictionary, it looks like, and it says, an O.J. Simpson is a man who can get away with anything. And the example sentence is, yo, he just OJ'd your ass. Okay?
Posted. Yes, thank you, Jack Off Jack.
Yeah, posted by Jack Off Jack. All right. So, final thought. Is this the last slide?
Yeah, and it's like, I think it's too intellectual for our state of mind at the moment.
Okay.
So we can
well, just read it at least.
Continue. And it's a cool graphic. Okay, fine. I don't think OJ exists outside of the white public gaze, and he can't stay away from that adoration. And when you have such an unrepentant history of domestic abuse in your private life, you rely upon the public to create the counter to that image. He still needs us to believe he's the character called O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, my eyes glazed over when I heard the phrase white public gaze, so I don't think I have much to contribute there, but it's like the only thing I think is really kind of like gaze. This just sounds like some pretentious lit crit bullshit, but
a little bit. Yeah. But I think the idea that he was very addicted to fame is important. Mm-hmm. One of those things like where we see MJ and his demise, like no bad publicity is better than no publicity, and I kind of think OJ to some extent just had that aspect to him.
Right. All right, what's the next text? This was my text, believe it or not. I chose it, but my co-host was more invested than I was. But anyway, once again, we thank Brian and John for their contributions to this episode and all those who voted. And again, those of you that voted for the Gaddafi UN speech. That's coming soon. So we hear you, and we will provide that episode. But what's next?
Well, Mark, if you are accusing me of hijacking your text, you may happily do the reverse with the next text, which is a request from listener of the show and sometime participant Tom, a fellow Tom from Devon, and he's requested that we discuss the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot.
Okay, yeah, I have some things to say about Mr. Eliot and that poem in particular, so we'll do it.
I've never read it, so
we'll do
I
it.
look forward to it.
We'll do it. All right, and so as always, subscribe to our newsletters on Substack. I'm at Mark Will Wright, WRITE.substack.com. My co-host is at tomekb.substack.com. Are you still posting there?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Well, then subscribe to me and my Substack. Everything, all the good shit from texting, books are burning, Guitar and Pen. Those are my other podcasts. And also, you just get all the updates from my writing activities when I have new books coming out and so on. Also, subscribe.
Mark, can I tell them about the T-shirt?
Oh, the T-shirt. What's the T-shirt?
Well, if any listener has made it to the end of this show and can tell us to within 2 minutes of how long this show lasted, you can message Mark and he will send you an autographed T-shirt.
Did I promise that?
He delivers anywhere to continental Taiwan.
Okay, I don't know what he's talking about. I totally disclaim all of that, but you can email me through the Substack, and if you want some merchandise or you want to order a book, or I don't know, we'll work something out. So just email me through the Substack, but you got to sign up for the newsletter first. Then you can ask me any question you want about merchandise, books, music, all of that. But in the meantime, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's also at Mark Will Wright, WRITE. And on that note, we will conclude this very lengthy episode. It was called The Story of OJ, subtitled The Life and Crimes of Orenthal James Simpson. Tomek didn't like any of those titles, so you can retitle it however you like. This was season 3, episode 9, I dare say. I hope I've got that right. And we'll be back with episode 10 of this 3rd season of Texting soon.